What if your own family tried to erase you, not emotionally, but legally? One day, I found a death certificate in my mail, my name, my birthday, my social security number, cause of death, drowning in Mexico. But I never drowned. I was alive, breathing, right there, holding a towel fresh from the dryer. That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. My parents had filed to declare me dead, then moved millions of dollars from my grandfather's trust into their control. And to make it stick, they faked psychiatric records, forged my signature, and told everyone I'd lost my mind. I'm Rachel Dawson. I was legally dead for over 3 years, and now I'm back. In this video, I'm exposing exactly how they did it. The fake doctors, the hidden shell companies, and the silent war they launched just to keep me gone. This isn't revenge, this is survival. And if you've ever felt like your truth didn't matter, this story is for you. Stay to the end, because what they did to me could happen to you. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to get to know you a little better. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. That way, I can send you a special shout out. Now, let's begin our story together. The envelope didn't feel like regular mail. I noticed it as soon as I came back in from switching the laundry. It was lying at an angle on the entry table, cream-colored, thick, the kind of paper that makes your hands pause before touching it. No stamps, just a printed label with my full name in sharp black ink. The return address read, Department of Health, Vital Records Division. I blinked at it for a few seconds, holding a still warm towel against my chest like a shield. I hadn't requested anything from them. Not lately, not ever. I carried it to the kitchen counter, brushing aside a half-finished sketch of a blazer and a chipped blue mug. The room was quiet, save for the dryer humming behind the wall. Outside, snow softened the world into silence. It took me longer than I care to admit to open it. I ran my thumb across the edge, picked up a butter knife, hesitated. The paper inside was heavier than expected. Official, raised seal, notarized, with blue ink still catching light. My eyes found the top line automatically. Name of deceased, Rachel May Dawson. Date of death, June 12th, 2020. Cause, accidental drowning. Location, San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. I read it 3 times before the words even made sense. My date of birth, my social security number, even my last known address from before I left Connecticut. I sat down slowly, the certificate still trembling in my hands. My fingers had gone cold. At first, I tried to explain it away. There had to be another Rachel Dawson, another life, another file. But the details were too exact, too intimate. My gaze drifted toward the corner of the counter, where a bowl of apples sat untouched. My mother always peeled apples before slicing them, each piece the same size, each edge curved inward like she'd studied geometry instead of fruit. I used to think it was a form of love, neat, efficient love. Now I wasn't so sure. Mexico. That trip. I hadn't thought about it in months, maybe years. Back then, in early 2020, my parents had urged me to take a break. A sabbatical, they'd called it. Reset your mind, my father had said. Get some space from the chaos, my mother had added. I've been running my own design work from home, freelancing full-time, and apparently projecting too much stress onto the family. I landed in San Miguel just before everything shut down. On day 2, my phone stopped working. On day 3, my bank account locked itself. The hotel I was booked into suddenly had no record of me, and the internet was spotty enough that by the time I found a cafe with a working signal, a full week had passed. I never thought it was sabotage. I just assumed it was bad luck, timing, a mess of disconnected things. But this paper said otherwise. I stood up and reached for my phone. My hand still shook slightly, but the muscle memory kicked in. One number, Ethan. He picked up on the second ring. I didn't say hello. It's me, I said. A beat. Then, Rachel? I closed my eyes. I just got a death certificate with my name, filed in Vermont, dated 2020 silence. I could hear him exhale. I thought you ghosted me, he said quietly. I thought I had time, I replied, but they filed this. My parents, or someone close? Ethan, it's real, official. They declared me dead. Okay, he said slowly. Don't panic, but that's serious, Rachel. Like, felony serious. I know. Do you still have it? I haven't touched anything else. Good, don't fold it, don't tear it, don't even breathe on it wrong. That almost made me laugh. Almost. I glanced back toward the envelope, still gaping open on the counter. I'll call you back, I told him. I need to check the rest of the mail. The line went dead. I walked to the small stack on the entry table. Mostly junk. Postcards, grocery circulars, an alumni magazine I never subscribed to. One envelope stood out. Smaller, handwritten, thick cream paper again. I knew that script. Samuel Briggs, my grandfather's lawyer. Inside was a single page. No greeting, no signature. Just 6 words written in Samuel's careful, slanted hand. If you're reading this, they're not. We have work to do. I leaned back against the table. The letter didn't say much, but it said enough. Samuel was still out there, and he knew. Outside, the snow had turned to slush, pooling at the edges of the steps. I stared through the front window, fingers still curled around the letter. I'm not dead, I whispered. And somehow, that felt like the beginning. They weren't ready for what came next. The office hadn't changed in 10 years. Neither had the smell, peppermint and paper dust, with a faint trace of whatever polish the receptionist used on the wood paneling. Even the chair I used to sit in was still there, its leather cracked along the arms like it had aged with memory. Samuel Briggs stood as I entered, blinking twice before stepping out from behind his desk. My God, he said, almost a whisper. Rachel. In the flesh, I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. Surprise. He didn't offer a hug. He never had, even when I was younger. But his voice softened, and he gestured for me to sit. I slid into the chair without waiting, brushing my coat back as I did. My hands found each other in my lap, fingers twisting slightly. I got a death certificate, I said. Filed, stamped, mailed to me. I've seen it, Samuel said, pouring coffee from a carafe that looked older than I was. He handed me a chipped white mug, steam curling over the rim. I just never expected to see you. I didn't expect to be declared dead. He sat behind his desk, folding his hands across a worn leather folder. The sunlight outside was thin, struggling through frost-streaked glass. I glanced toward the corner window, the city a haze of cold blue. Tell me, I said, what exactly did they do? He opened the folder. Your father filed for probate in March of last year, claimed you passed away in Mexico. No remains recovered. The paperwork was brief, but it passed. I stared down at the coffee, watching it ripple gently. And the trust? He nodded. That's why I kept it locked away. Calvin, your grandfather, set very specific terms. The estate, the property in Litchfield County, and the liquid assets, roughly $7 million, are held in your name. But there was a clause. You must be alive by your 33rd birthday, and... He paused. And you must not be involved in the family business. I let out a breath, soft and short. That sounded like Calvin. He'd always said the Dawson brand was more show than substance, a castle built on public perception. He never wanted me anywhere near it. I turned 33 in June, I said. June 14th, he replied. I remember. So I have 6 months? Less, really. Probate proceedings take time, and if your legal identity isn't reinstated before then. It all goes to the family trust, I finished for him. He nodded again, slower this time, controlled by Robert and Stephen. I leaned back in the chair, the frame creaking slightly beneath me. The numbers echoed in my head. 7 million, 6 months. 2 people who had every reason to keep me buried. I thought silence was safety, I said. I thought leaving was enough. Samuel didn't respond right away. Instead, he pushed the folder across the desk. Inside were documents I hadn't seen in years. Calvin's original letter, his trust declaration, property deeds, and a line item for a sketchbook allowance I'd forgotten existed. I flipped through, pausing when something slipped from between the pages, a piece of folded paper, worn at the edges. I recognized it instantly, a sketch, mine, a blazer, strong shoulders, bold collar, clean lines, the kind of piece I used to dream of including in my design portfolio. It was wrinkled now, ink slightly smudged, but still alive on the page. "I drew this in college," I murmured, running my fingers along the edges, "on the train home from Boston, after a critique class that left me in tears." "I found it in Calvin's desk drawer," Samuel said. "He kept it." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. We sat for a while, the only sound the faint buzz of a radiator and the muted traffic below. Then Samuel leaned forward, voice low. "Rachel," he said, "they didn't just erase you. They built an empire on your absence." The words landed like a stone in my chest. I folded the sketch carefully and tucked it into the inside pocket of my coat. My fingers stayed there a moment longer than necessary. When I stood to leave, the air felt heavier, like something had been set in motion that couldn't be stopped. "They wrote you out, but that doesn't mean the story's over," Samuel said behind me. I didn't turn back. "No," I whispered. "It means I get to write the next chapter." I thought the worst had come and gone, but it wasn't probate papers that arrived next. It was a summons, hand-delivered in the morning with the kind of solemnity usually reserved for funeral notices or final warnings. The envelope was pale gray, embossed with the seal of the Connecticut Probate Court. Inside was a petition for emergency conservatorship of adult individual, Rachel May Dawson. The grounds: delusional behavior, emotional instability, inability to manage financial affairs. I sat at my kitchen table, my breath curling faint in the February air. Outside, frost pressed itself against the windows like a warning. I remembered something my mother said once over dinner. She was slicing a pork roast, setting each medallion down with surgical precision. "Women who talk too much get institutionalized," she said with a smirk, like it was a joke. Back then, I'd rolled my eyes. Now the words echoed differently. Ethan showed up half an hour later. He didn't knock. He walked straight in with 2 coffees and a Dunkin' bag clutched in his arm like an emergency kit. "Fuel," he said, placing the cup beside my laptop. He noticed the summons on the table. He didn't ask, just pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "They're going to say I'm unstable," I said flatly. "And now they have a document to prove it." Samuel arrived shortly after, coat still dusted with snow. His breath fogged the entryway as he pulled off his gloves. "I read the motion," he said, laying down a file. "They're citing a stay in Mexico." "They're twisting the truth," I replied. "It was a private clinic. I was dehydrated. My passport was stolen. I spent 2 nights under observation. Heat stroke, panic, but they'll call it psychiatric." He nodded. "They've attached a psych evaluation from a doctor." "Alan Nair. I've never met him." Samuel opened his tablet. "He's real, but not affiliated with any of your care." "Which means he was paid," Ethan muttered, "or threatened." My hand stayed on the coffee cup, its warmth grounding me. Then the doorbell rang again. I didn't move. Neither did Ethan. Samuel glanced toward me, but I already knew. Jessica. She stood on the front steps in a navy coat, her hair tucked neatly into a clip the way our mother liked it. Her face looked like it hadn't slept in days. "I shouldn't be here," she said softly. I stepped aside. We sat at the table, the air between us stiff. She held a manila envelope in her lap like it might burn her if she let it go. "I found something," she said, "in Dad's desk, a draft, with your name, your signature." I reached across the table. She flinched just a little before handing it over. Inside was a 4-page affidavit. It claimed I'd confessed to delusions, that I believed my family was plotting against me, that I'd agreed to step away from all financial matters indefinitely. My eyes scanned the lines quickly and then more slowly. The signature was mine. Every loop, every slant. Except it wasn't. Jessica's voice broke the silence. "I know your handwriting," she whispered. "This isn't yours." I looked up. Her eyes were watery, but not from tears, from fear. "He said you'd come back," she added, "that if you did, things would get complicated." Samuel took the pages, scanned them. "We'll need forensic analysis," he said. "I already made copies," Jessica said quickly, "and I took photos before I left." Ethan leaned back, arms crossed. So they forged her signature, filed for emergency conservatorship, and planted psychiatric records. That's not just manipulative, that's criminal. I picked up the last page again. The diagnosis was bolded, fixated on conspiracy, emotionally volatile, paranoid regarding close family members. I didn't cry, I didn't even blink. I set it down slowly, smoothing the crease with my palm. "They're not just trying to silence me," I said. "They're trying to make my truth disappear." Jessica didn't speak. She just looked down at her hands. Ethan reached into the bag and pulled out an egg sandwich. Still warm, he set it next to me with no words. "I didn't believe it at first," Jessica said. "I wanted to. It was easier. But then I saw the sketch, your blazer design. He had it framed in his office like it was some family relic. But he said you gave up design, that you'd never come back." I glanced toward my desk where the original sketch sat, folded but not forgotten. "No," I said softly. "I'm back." There was a long silence. Then Ethan spoke. "They want quiet," he said, voice low, certain. "What do we give them?" I looked at him. "Let's make noise," I replied. The message came without a name, just a number string and one line of text. Archive 9, 3rd floor, Cabinet C, no greeting, no sign-off. Just a set of quiet instructions dropped into my encrypted inbox like a stone in a still pond. I stared at it for a long minute, then forwarded it to Noah and Ethan with one word: meet. We drove out to Bridgeport the next afternoon in silence. The wind howled low around the car, the kind of wind that sounded like it was trying to tell you something you didn't want to hear. I wore my charcoal gloves the entire drive. Thin leather, smooth-lined, not for warmth, but for control. My fingers had been unsteady all morning, but inside those gloves, they were still. The building was older than I remembered. It had been years since I'd even seen the old Walker Holdings logo, half faded now above a side entrance with peeling paint and a door that groaned like it had been waiting to be opened. Noah stepped forward, flashlight already in hand. Ethan stayed a step behind me, his shoulders taut. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "No," I replied, "but we're out of maybes." Inside, the air was thick, wet cardboard and printer toner, dust that clung to your coat like guilt. Rows of metal shelves stretched the length of the room, broken only by the occasional forgotten filing cabinet or blank monitor. There was no sound except the creak of our footsteps. "Stairs are that way," Noah said, pointing with his flashlight. "3rd floor." Each step felt like it took something. Time, breath, memory. The stairwell lights flickered half-heartedly, casting long shadows up the wall. My gloves creaked as I gripped the railing. The 3rd floor was colder than the others. Most of the windows had been blacked out with old paper or duct tape. At the back of the room, tucked behind a half-collapsed pile of banker boxes, was a tall cabinet marked with a crooked, faded label. C. "This is it," I said. Noah pulled open the drawers one by one. They stuck a little, groaning against rust. He stopped at the 5th drawer and carefully pulled it out. Inside were manila folders, each labeled with a coded string I didn't recognize. He flipped through quickly, then paused. "Found it," he said. He handed me a folder with a black stripe across the top and the word Client Risk. Archive 9 stamped on the front. I opened it slowly. Inside were contracts, debt forms, Signed documents listing my name as borrower, guarantor, primary contact, Archangel funding, amount $2,800,000, jurisdiction, Cayman Islands. My signature stared back at me, perfectly replicated. Even the dot on the I in my middle name was in the right place, but I'd never signed any of this. Stapled to the back was a passport scan, my face, my name. But the expiration date was wrong. The issue date didn't match. The photo wasn't the one on my real passport. It was similar, but older, off somehow. They forged everything, I said. Noah nodded. They knew exactly what they were doing. These weren't just filed, they were routed, dated, layered under shell entities. He pulled his laptop from his bag, settled on a nearby crate, and started typing with rapid precision. Legacy Recovery LLC, he muttered. On paper, it looks like a debt resolution firm, but it's not registered in Connecticut. It doesn't exist in the public filings. I looked over his shoulder. Flow charts appeared on screen. Wire routes, account numbers, transfers. Internal payments from Walker Holdings labeled as consultant fees, then rerouted to Legacy, then offshored. 3 flash drives, Noah said. I'm making copies now, one for Samuel, one for the Attorney General, one stays offline. I nodded. My heart wasn't pounding. It had gone quiet, cold in that sharp, clear way that only came when the truth took shape. Ethan hovered nearby, scanning the shelves. They really thought no one would ever check, he said. They thought I was dead, I replied. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. Noah didn't look up. That made it easy. I tucked the folder into a rigid envelope, sealing it shut with tape from Noah's kit. Each piece of evidence now had its place, categorized, protected. My name was on all of it, and not one document had been created with my consent. As we prepared to leave, I stood for a moment at the edge of the cabinet, letting my eyes wander over the rows of forgotten records. I thought of something my father used to say when I was little. Keep records off-site. If you want something lost, bury it in plain view. It had sounded like business advice then. Now, it felt like prophecy. We made our way back down the stairs, one slow step at a time. Outside, the wind had died down, replaced by a heavy stillness, the kind of stillness that meant change was already in motion. When we reached the car, Ethan popped the trunk, dropped the locked document case inside, and handed me a Dunkin' coffee. Large, no sugar. You're gonna need it, he said. I took it without a word, my gloved fingers curling tight around the cup. We drove back in silence again. No music, no talking, just the sound of tires on old pavement and the weight of what we now carried. As we crossed the bridge into Stamford, my phone buzzed. A single message. They know you were there. Be careful. I didn't recognize the number. No name. No sign-off. But the words sent a chill down my spine that even the coffee couldn't thaw. I didn't say anything, just slipped the phone into my pocket, leaned my head back against the seat, and stared out at the gray sky. Some records weren't meant to be found, but I had found them. And now they knew I was looking. I didn't plan to make a scene, but apparently when someone legally dead walks into court, people notice. The marble steps of the Fairfield County Courthouse were slick with rain. I could see my reflection as I climbed, coat pulled tight, black hair pinned back, heels steady against the weight of expectation. Beside me, Samuel held the umbrella with one hand and a waterproof briefcase in the other. Ethan followed quietly behind us, scanning the crowd with silent precision. Reporters lingered under the awning, cameras sheathed in plastic. One leaned into another and whispered. Another raised a phone. "That's her," someone said. I didn't look. I kept walking. Inside, the courthouse smelled of old carpet and wet wool. Security gave me a double take, then glanced at Samuel, then back at me. No one said a word, but the air felt like it was holding its breath. Courtroom 2B. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. When the doors opened, the silence wasn't immediate, but it was fast. My mother sat on the far end, posture perfect. Her beige coat was spotless, her pearls understated but deliberate. Robert stood at the defense table, his expression unreadable. Stephen paced near the bench, lips tight, fists flexing and unflexing. Jessica sat in the gallery, hands folded in her lap, eyes down. Samuel led us to the front. We passed the bailiff, the clerk, the rows of observers, some familiar, most not. I heard a few pens scratching paper. One reporter whispered into a recorder. I took my seat at the petitioner's table and exhaled once through my nose. Quiet, firm. My grandfather used to say, "Court is theater. Control your scene partner or control the room." Judge Monroe entered at 9:03. Silver hair, horn-rimmed glasses, a presence that made you sit up straighter without realizing it. She scanned the documents in front of her, then looked at me. "You're Rachel Mae Dawson?" she asked. "I am," I replied. She didn't blink. "You've petitioned this court to revoke a death certificate filed in 2020, reinstate your legal identity, and freeze all probate-related estate transfers until further review." "Yes, Your Honor." Samuel stood next. "We have verified medical records, witness testimony, original identification, and clear evidence of fraudulent filings." "Objection," Robert said, already on his feet. "The petitioner has a documented history of psychological instability." "Based on what?" Judge Monroe asked. He gestured toward the defense table. "Psychiatric evaluations from licensed professionals. We also have a conservatorship petition pending in the state docket." Samuel lifted a folder. "The evaluation was signed by Dr. Alan Nair. We have confirmation he has never treated Ms. Dawson and was compensated by parties associated with the Dawson Trust." The judge raised an eyebrow. "We'll let the testimony speak." And so it began. First witness, Noah. He explained how shell companies were formed, Legacy Recovery LLC Archangel Funding. He walked the court through invoices, bank routes, and passport scans forged in my name. His voice never wavered, but I could see the sweat at his temple, the tight line of his jaw. "The funds were rerouted through non-existent firms," he said. "They used her legal death to consolidate control. The transactions began within weeks of the declaration." Next, Jessica. She stood with shoulders drawn tight. Her voice cracked on the first line. "I was told Rachel wasn't coming back," she said, "that she'd signed everything over. But I saw the affidavit. It wasn't her signature." She paused, eyes flickering toward me. "I know her handwriting. I grew up watching her write letters to our grandfather. That signature was forged." My mother didn't flinch. Robert folded his arms. Then came Richard Langley. He looked older than I remembered. His suit was still pressed, but his tie was slightly crooked. "They told me I'd lose my license if I refused," he said. "Stephen threatened to go to the board. He said Rachel was a liability to the family business, that removing her was necessary for the brand." "Did you believe her to be dead?" Samuel asked. Richard hesitated. "I believed they wanted her to be." I looked down at my gloved hands folded in my lap. Black leather against wood. When it was my turn to speak, the room shifted. I could feel it. I stood slowly, walked to the witness box, placed one hand on the rail. "I didn't die in Mexico," I said. I disappeared. I chose silence because I thought distance would keep me safe. But I came back not because I wanted revenge. I came back because I refused to let someone else write the ending to my life. I took a breath. They forged my name, my signature, my history. They sold off pieces of my identity to fund something I never agreed to. But this courtroom, this space, this is where the truth gets to stand up. Judge Monroe watched me carefully, but she said nothing. "I'm not here to destroy anyone," I added. "I'm here to reclaim what's mine, not just property, not even dignity, but truth, the version of myself that doesn't need approval to exist." When I stepped down, I didn't look at my parents. I didn't need to. The judge called a recess. 30 minutes later, we were back. Her ruling was brief. The court finds the petitioner is legally and biologically alive. The death certificate is revoked. Probate proceedings are halted. The Dawson estate is frozen and referred for federal investigation. Robert didn't react. My mother looked straight ahead. Stephen muttered something under his breath. I didn't catch it, but as I passed him on the way out, he leaned toward our father. She might have won the court, he said. She hasn't won the family. Outside, the rain had turned to mist. The courthouse steps gleamed like glass. Reporters pressed forward, cameras flashing, pens raised. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. But someone shouted over the noise, "Is it true? The resurrection of Rachel Dawson?" I kept walking. 6 months later, a package arrived with no return address. Just my name, written in neat cursive. The kind of penmanship you only learn from years of thank you cards and formal invitations. My mother's handwriting. I stood in the front office of the Dawson Initiative, still holding a half-empty mug of coffee, the scent of warm blueberry muffins wafting from the break room. The sunlight was soft that morning. October had come in gentle this year, with trees blushing red and gold along the sidewalk and wind that spoke in whispers instead of shouts. I turned the envelope over, hesitating for just a moment before opening it. Inside was a folded sheet of sketch paper, my silk blazer. The lines were just as I remembered, clean, deliberate, sharp where they needed to be, and soft where they mattered. The kind of design I once imagined wearing to my first real launch, back when ambition meant runway lights and magazine blurbs. Tucked behind the sketch was a note. You were always meant to lead. Mom, that was all. No apology, no explanation, just ink and truth. I didn't cry. Some things don't come with tears anymore. Some things land quieter. I walked it back to my office, the one with the tall window that caught afternoon light just right. Above my desk, I pinned the sketch inside a simple wooden frame. It sat just beneath a corkboard filled with sticky notes. One read, "They called me crazy, too." Another, "He said no one would believe me." Another, in bright green, "I matter. Still." I touched the edge of the frame, then turned to the long table behind me where a blueprint was spread across the surface. Phase 2, the rise. A second center, bigger, deeper, with rooms named Anchor, Clarity, and Voice. We weren't just offering shelter. We were building memory into the walls, spaces where survivors could walk in and know, without question, that their story wasn't too strange, too much, or too late. Behind me, I heard the low hum of a printer. In the hallway, laughter drifted from the kitchen, soft, tired, real. A group of women were prepping for the afternoon support group. One of them, maybe 25, had pinned a new sticky note onto the board. "I'm not broken. I'm rebuilding." Ethan passed by the door with a folder under his arm. He didn't say anything, just offered a small nod, the kind that says everything's moving forward. And I smiled. Small. Certain. Later that afternoon, I made myself a second cup of coffee and sat with the plans again. My hands no longer shook when I drew. I traced room outlines, wrote down furniture needs, imagined windows placed for maximum light, the practical parts of healing, the architecture of care. When the day wound down and the sun had dipped low, I lingered in the main room. Empty now, except for chairs left slightly askew, cups in the drying rack, warmth still radiating from the muffin trays. I looked around. This was mine, not because I'd won a case, not because the papers said I was real again, but because I chose to stay, to build, to claim space. I was written off, buried in paper, but now I write the story. There's something quiet about healing that no courtroom can capture. It comes in sunlight through office windows, in the warmth of blueberry muffins, in the sound of someone saying, "Me too," and meaning it. What I went through taught me this. When people try to erase your voice, the bravest thing you can do is use it. Sometimes family fails us, not from hate but fear, but love, real love, isn't about silence. It's about showing up, telling the truth, and building spaces where others feel safe to do the same. If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll share your thoughts. We never know who might be listening, waiting for one voice to remind them they're not alone.